The following is a production of UNO Television for KYNE TV. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Consider this. The medical profession is very complicated. There's a lot of pressure from HMOs and PPOs and cutting costs. And doctors are caught in the middle. We're going to talk about one aspect of that, and that's the part right in the middle where they're dealing with patients and maybe how some of these other things affect them, and just dealing one-on-one with patients. I don't think we as patients deal well enough, and we sometimes wonder if our doctors do. Interesting program at UNMC, and we're going to talk about that today. Dave Steele, Dr. Dave Steele, PhD, is director of the Integrated Clinical Experience at the Medical Center here in Omaha. Marianne Manners coordinates the standardized patients for ICE, and you'll find out what that means, standardized patients. I thought that was a kick of a term when I first heard it. And you will meet a standardized patient, Marilyn Bremer, who is also a retired school teacher. And we have someone that's been through this whole program, and that's Shelley McCoy. She's a first-year resident at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And I find this whole thing fascinating, having been on the receiving end of doctor services for all, as of today, 47 years of my life. And you always leave the office a little, I think, unsettled. Not just because you're sick, but because maybe you didn't communicate right. We're going to talk about the doctors. Dave, this is a whole new world, pressures on the medical profession. You're trying to alleviate some of that pressure in probably the most important area.
Yes, what we have done at UNMC, much like many medical schools in the country today, is tried to revise our curriculum to expose our medical students much earlier to patients and patient care and interactions with patients. And in doing that, it's been necessary to develop new curricula to help prepare them for that contact. Our students now start seeing patients in September of their very first year of medical school, out in the community under the supervision of a practicing physician.
Now let me ask you this, and I don't mean to be flip, although, well, maybe I do a little bit, but I don't mean it to be this way. When did you first decide you needed to start them earlier on doing what they would be doing, hopefully in some fashion, unless they're researchers, for the rest of their physician days?
Well, excuse me, traditionally medical schools in the United States have been organized on what's called a 2+2 system. And the first 2 years has been heavily involved with basic sciences, anatomy, chemistry, biochemistry, physiology, pathophysiology, topics of that sort. And then the second 2 years has been the clinical portion of their training, where they spend time rotating through various services, family medicine, internal medicine, surgery, obstetrics.
Getting a feel for the different areas.
Right. But in the last 10 or 15 years, the medical education community has been moving more towards an integrated approach to training people to become physicians. And we've wanted to provide students with opportunities to be able to see why they're learning the anatomy, why they're learning the physiology, how that applies to the care of individual patients. And that's more difficult to do if you're demarcating very clearly and defining very strictly what they study and when. And
not to mention that it's a huge load being a medical student, just keeping up with the science end of it. Is this, you said other medical schools are doing this, is this becoming mandatory and commonplace as sort of a part of any standard medical curriculum now in some fashion?
I think that it is rapidly becoming the rule as opposed to the exception. And the UNMC was on sort of the leading edge of the curve in terms of these kinds of changes, but it's very rapidly becoming the standard mode of providing medical education today.
Now there's a lot of facets to integrated clinical experience, or ICE as they call it at University Med Center, but not the least of which is the standardized patient, which I think it's kind of a funny name, but for kind of a fake patient. But standardized obviously is a key word there. And Marianne, these patients are important, right?
We think they're really important. What we try to do with our standardized patients is expose the students in a safe environment with patients that are here for that purpose, and enable them to practice interviewing, communication, telling patients what their diagnosis may be, those kinds of issues, with people that know their learners. And to be able to experiment, if I say it this way, is that appreciated more by the patient than if I present it in a different way. And so that's basically what we do with our people that we bring in to play standardized patients, is give them a specific scenario with a goal in mind, and the standardized part has to do with that, so that each student gets exposed to basically the same kind of scenarios for them to practice.
This is supposed to be sort of a safe haven for the student too, isn't it? In that, and I don't know. We'll talk to Ms. McCoy later and find out how it feels on the end of being the doctor to be. She is a doctor now, but where I know as different professions, you have a mold of what you should be. Where you get this, if you get it from television or you had a relative or spent a lot of time with doctors or whatever, but we all have this role. You almost want them to, within a certain normal limits, break out and try some different approaches, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that's really what we want to provide them the safe haven for, is in a small group with their peers, where nobody else is paying any attention, to try different things, to try a different way to phrase a question, to try a different way to make an explanation, and to step out of that comfort zone or what they think they're supposed to be doing and try something new or different for them and see if it works better, see if the patients appreciate it more, or understand better, or are more forthcoming with the information that they're trying to get the doctor to listen to and that the physician wants to elicit to help making any diagnosis.
Now, I would guess that most of these standardized patients, they do it as a job, they're employed, so there are certain expectations, but and Marilyn can probably tell us, it has to be something, though, that you enjoy, seeing these, in most cases, younger people, and although they're older medical students, learn to do something that you must feel is important because you've been a patient, right? I mean, a real live patient many times.
Mm-hmm. I think all of us that are standardized patients at the Med Center have come to respect how hard it is to be in med school, how hard it is to be becoming a doctor. And so I think we tend to be student friendly. But on the other hand, within the program, we get fantastic training both from Marianne and sometimes from real physicians themselves on a particular scenario, a particular case, so that we have to maybe memorize a great deal, but when we get together in advance, we learn all of the important particulars so that we don't throw people. We also know, for instance, what the student has been working on that week as far as whether it's open-ended questions or how to get a patient to comply. So we're given some tremendous training to do this.
I thought that was one of the most interesting things. I was reading some of the literature from the class, some of which, or I think all of which, Dr. Steele, you helped create these syllabuses or curriculum. Mm-hmm. And things that I guess all the years that I've been a patient, mm-hmm. More times than I'd like, probably less times than many, is there is a lot more to being a doctor than just coming in and prescribing the right pill. I mean, you mentioned it. People will walk out the door, get the prescription, only take the pill half the time, or mm-hmm. they have a hang-up with something but didn't want to say, or, you're really trying to open up a whole set of healing just because if you don't communicate right, the healing that you work to do might never take place.
That's true. One of the premises underlying our approach to medical education is that being a physician is very much being an applied behavioral scientist. The basic sciences, the basic biological sciences, of course, are vitally important. We don't want to underestimate that at all. But once you've learned the basics of anatomy, physiology, and pathology, then you're interacting with another human being. And that's where the behavioral skills and the behavioral sciences come into play. And the whole issue of how you can help facilitate a patient to tell you the information that you need in order to make the correct diagnosis, or how you can deliver information in a way that will help the patient to better retain that information and to follow through with your treatment recommendations, are all communication skills and behavioral skills.
Now, I would assume, Shelley, that for some of and you're 2 years out of this, so you went through the ICE program, but you've also now applying some of it, that there are some of you or some of your cohorts, this was a pretty easy leap, but for some medical students, it's almost a quantum leap to go from book learning, and to real life people, even though that was your intent the entire time, was to work with people.
That's correct. For many people, it's really, really easy to move from books to real people because many people have already had that opportunity, but for others, it is much more difficult. And this provided an opportunity for us in the early years to practice the skills that we were going to need. And just like everything else, practice makes perfect, and it was nice to have a safe place where we could ask questions of our patients and look foolish and yet not worry about looking foolish.
Well, you mentioned taking their medication, and that was mentioned in one of the syllabi, that, are you going to have a hard time taking this 3 times a day? And one of the patients says, well, maybe the morning and night's not so bad, but at work I just forget. Before you ran into this early on, did you even think that was just going to be an issue? I'm going to find out what's wrong, where it hurts, maybe some underlying problem, and then write the script.
That particular one I probably did, but there were so many other things that I didn't know, that I didn't consider.
Right.
Like, how do you get someone to comply? How do you check for their understanding, and what kind of situations you have to set up when you have to talk to a patient about something serious. All the little intricacies that I didn't really know and that I had opportunity to learn about and then to practice.
And you are in taking family practice as your specialty.
Yes.
And that means that a physician like you would be dealing with everything from maybe potential cancer, or trying to diagnose that, or at least steer them to the right physician, or just trying to sexually transmitted diseases, dealing with everything from preteens up to octogenarians. I mean, and so just those age brackets alone, everything else, personalities aside, every quirks, everything aside, that's a stretch.
Yeah.
Dealing with, just the age difference.
That's one of the things I respect about the program. Mary Ann gets as much diversity in standardized patients as she possibly can. Gender, sex, race. We even have one a year where you might mention the one we do with your companion school. I think that's a particularly good one.
You mentioned teenagers, Carol. One of the sessions that we have that's been very effective and also quite popular is that taking histories from adolescents sometimes can be a challenge. So every year we bring in a group of students from Benson High School, and they basically role play themselves, although we give them a symptom, but they play typical teenagers, and some of them are shy and don't want to talk, and some of them are cocky, and the whole range of behaviors of adolescence. And we let the students practice those skills that they've been learning on adult patients now on a new population with teenagers. And both the teenagers love it. They love coming to the med center and doing this and seeing what med school is like, but it tends to be very effective with the students, med students as well.
Most people I know, how they look at doctors, and some of my lady friends will only go to, let's say, a female OBGYN, or the people look for certain things in doctors, and I find that almost without exception, what they look for in a doctor or how they view their physicians or criticize them has a lot to do with their first few experiences, about 11 to 14, especially women. But I can't speak for men. I don't talk intimately with them about that sort of thing. But just how they're treated at that very vulnerable age when your body is, is changing has a lot to do with how they view about everything about doctors and even their own personal health from that point on. Is that?
Well, I think that's real accurate, definitely from what I hear the Benson students say, because I'm the one that goes, picks them up, and then brings them to the med center. We have our little interaction, and then I tend to take them home. And what they talk about on the bus was who they'd go back to if they were a real doctor and who they wouldn't.
And it wasn't just geared on how good looking they were they? I mean,
there's a part of that.
Yes.
But I mean, they're astute enough even at that age to maybe pick up on some of the things you picked up on when you observed.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Everybody, I don't care what your age is, you know when you're being listened to. And that's, I'm sure you remember, that's one of the keys that we would always say, because you see, we give, the standardized patients give feedback after the students have done things. And, we tell them, we love the way you listened, or your eye contact with us, or the fact that you just sat there and listened and let us tell our story instead of jumping in and being done with us.
We're all living longer, which means we're going to be going to doctors a lot longer in our life, which is good job security for the medical profession. But what I'm saying is we'll go through a number of things in our life that are not as serious, but a lot more of them, and maybe some semi-serious or very serious things, and we'll live past those, which people didn't do before. So we have to incorporate. We're not just a necessary evil for doctors because without this they would have no profession, but I mean we have to learn how to do it too. But you're teaching the doctors, or are you teaching the patients too by teaching the doctors?
Well, that's an interesting concept. One of the things that I think comes up is in the world today, patients have become consumers, and there are certain things that they expect from physicians now, and they're
Imagine
generally
that.
Yes, exactly. And in very few markets anymore, isn't there a place that they can make a selection, and they either will stay with a physician because they do feel their needs are being met, or they will go someplace else and find a physician who does meet those needs. So I think it is very interesting, even from the consumerism viewpoint, that patients, studies have shown that patients who are listened to and have very good rapport tend to be more satisfied with their visit, and patients who are more satisfied tend to stay. They tend to comply more and kind of get involved in their own health care and following doctors' recommendations. So it's really a cycle of things that builds kind of on itself. And then those kinds of things are what make patients stay or go elsewhere and doctor shop or whatever you would like to call it. So it's also in the physician's best interest. So yeah, we kind of expose the patients to a different way of interacting with a physician as well, and generally they like that.
Dr. McCoy.
Yes.
Shelley, as a resident, you're being able to see now on a day-to-day basis if these people were right. But I guess more what I'm asking, that realization when you go through something and you go, I'm reacting better. I can remember this. You don't sit every night and go, let's see, was that like the class we had? But do you find some benefit out of that? I suppose you wouldn't have volunteered to be here if you hadn't. But
That's right. That's one of the questions I ask myself: did I believe in this program or not? Because it would be silly to be here if I didn't. And I said yes, pretty quickly and pretty easily, because I'd had opportunity that very day to think, now how am I going to do this? And what crossed through my mind was, and where did I learn this? And I had to tell a patient that who had come in for something simple, that it was now known that he had metastasis to his liver and his lungs. And
in other words, his cancer
had cancer, and no one knew that he had cancer to begin with. And so I had to go in this room with this gentleman and tell him this, and all the things that crossed through my mind were, how am I going to do this? What needs does this patient have? How am I, going to let him know that this is serious, and all of these things. Check his understanding, be supportive, all those things that you need to do. And that's a pretty dramatic example, but every single day when I go into a patient's room, I think that my ICE curriculum was applicable. Just with the little things of asking at the very end, is there anything else? And that's something we learned. It sounds simple and it sounds easy, but it's checking to make sure, is there anything else? And it's very, very important. And so I would say, yes, my training was important, and that I continue to use it every single day with every single patient I see.
We are in a time where the cost of healthcare is skyrocketing much faster than the pace of inflation. And there is a lot of pressure, I mentioned this in the beginning, as we change the way we insure or have health coverage for consumers. You hear horror stories that in really strict, let's say HMOs or PPOs, that doctors are said you're only allowed so much on average per patient in the doctor's office. Now, whether that's true or not is irrelevant at this point. What I'm trying to say, though, is there is a time constraint. Let's just take flu season. I've been in doctor's offices where they can't even get you in because they're overflowing. So let's just talk about time from you only have so much in a day. Are these things beneficial in helping you use time wisely so that you don't make patients feel like they're hurried, and yet in the real world, everybody hurries?
One of the skills that we teach very early on is time management. And one of the techniques that we have found, based on research, can be very effective for physicians is to do agenda setting with patients very early in the visit. And
God, that sounds so sterile.
well, it does sound sterile, but that's essentially what it is a matter of determining what it is that the patient hopes to talk about during the course of a visit. The physician identifying what he or she needs to accomplish in that visit, assessing the patient's concerns against the time that's available, and then making decisions about how you're going to manage the time that you have, if you've got 10 minutes or if you have 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And one of the things that we try to convey to the students is that it's difficult to make reasoned, rational decisions about how to use the time in a visit if you don't have a good idea as to what the patient would like to accomplish, what you would like to accomplish, and then an opportunity to negotiate how you're going to use that time. Research has shown that on average, physicians interrupt patients within 18 seconds of asking their first question of how can I help you today, or whatever variant given
They've
physician.
made the diagnosis and they're gone.
Well,
they're off the block.
Well, it's this, that the physician has a set of questions that he or she would like to have answers to. And the thing of it is that patients don't always go to their doctor and present with the first concern, the most important concern that they may have, or they may not know what the most important symptom is. And so we really encourage physicians to think of the first minute or two of the visit as the time to identify what is this patient's concerns.
You know, I've often thought that I wish, and I have had some very good doctors and some that I wasn't too thrilled with. I can't say I've ever really, had any what I would call bad doctors as far as interpersonal. But one question I've always wished they would ask is there anything else on your mind?
Every one of our, as standardized patients, that's one of the things we give as feedback. You didn't ask me anything else, you assume too quickly. And so that's part of their training. That's one of the cardinal rules, is listen and be sure that you have everything that the patient is really there for.
Even if they said, that's an important thing. I'm glad we got this other thing taken care of. I'm going to have the nurse come in and talk to you about it. Just to know that they just heard me and they're going to take some action. I mean, we're very action-oriented people, even though they couldn't sit there and go on and on about it. Okay, now, we, as I said, we're going to live a lot longer. We're going to deal with doctors a lot more. Do you think that this makes the person experience better? To be able to be, that you feel more satisfied too when you have learned to relate better with the patients?
I'm more satisfied with that type of relationship. And I wouldn't think that every personality would be more satisfied with that type of relationship. But I also think those people would probably go into fields where it wouldn't be maybe as necessary. But the field I'm in, I think it's essential.
And there is actually data that shows that physicians who are more comfortable with their interpersonal skills and their relationships with their patients are also more satisfied with their practices and are less prone to burnout.
And I would think, believe it or not, I would think, all things being equal about the skill of a physician, that they would be, and this is not a major reason to do this, they'd be less likely to be sued.
Well, there's good data on that too, especially in the primary care arena. A recent study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that shows that physicians who have been sued tend to have poorer communication skills than those who have not been subject to
Explaining
that
the risks, explaining, all about taking medication, what to look for in the coming weeks, let's say in a pregnancy or whatever.
And just being a person.
I think that's, we'll put an asterisk after that.
It's a real key in our program. It's a real key. That's why, we take what we do seriously. We have a lot of fun as standardized patients, but we take it seriously, and the scenarios that we do are based on real cases, and some of them are very serious cases, and we take those very seriously when we're doing them.
We have a couple of minutes left, and I know this is about, and I want to state this is the Integrated Clinical Experience Program at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, just in case you joined us. People tend to do channel surfing. Let's just turn this around for a minute, if you will. What can you teach us as patients of how to relate to our doctors?
Well, I think that has helped me. I think basically I always thought of myself as able to speak up for myself, but having worked in this program and knowing more what the doctor really is looking for and how I can help, I can say, well, I have this in my past. I wonder if this has anything to do with my current health, for instance.
And then you would expect him or her not to dismiss that as
right.
You've been
Yes.
watching too many,
no,
or reading too many novels,
No.
or whatever.
No, absolutely.
What if a patient really has concerns about a doctor and really likes the person and would like to help them? What should they do about saying, you're what they used to call bedside manner? It's not anymore because you're in the office 99% of the time. What could I say, Dr. McCoy? You're out there. What
Maybe
could I
if you're
slow down.
Yeah, if you're concerned about time or something, maybe you might say, you seem a little hurried today. Would it be better if I made an appointment another day? That might clue them into the fact that they don't seem to have the time for you today, and sometimes the day is very busy. Or I really appreciate it, that you've had the time with me before, or taken time to listen to me before. And it seems a little rushed today. There are some really important things I want to discuss with you.
Well, we are all winners if you're all successful at what you do and what you have done. I want to thank you very much, Dave Steele, Marianne Manners, Marilyn Bremers, and Shelley McCoy, all involved or have been involved with the Integrated Clinical Experience Program at UNMC. A little food for thought, something to consider on Consider This about the way we get health care and the way we consume it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Carol.